ABNB is the narrowboat broker that specialises in selling quality new and used boats nationwide. Visit the ABNB website to buy or sell your canal boat. Hello and welcome to part 2 of the trip I took from Abingdon to Windsor in this boat, a former Norfolk Broads cruiser which had been kindly lent to me and my canal wife Lorna by long-time viewer and patron Ed. Thanks Ed. In part 1 we left the marina and headed east down the Thames, ending our second day due to torrential rain, moored on the bank in Reading. And here's where we pick up the tale again. Day 3 dawned bright and sunny. Despite the rain making the muddy bank as soft as toothpaste, our mooring pins had stayed in place, holding the boat firm overnight. So we breakfasted on tea and toast and set off in good spirits. Smack in the middle of Reading is the eastern end of the Kennet and Avon Canal. Here it is, coming up on the right. It doesn't look like much here, but goes all the way to the Bristol Channel, from where you could go out to the sea if you were feeling brave. We were not feeling so inclined, and we continued along the Thames. Very soon we found ourselves in the first lock of the day at Sonning. Once again, the lock was a treat for the eyes, clearly well tended. The temptation to nick the flowers was high. And, unlike the first couple of days, we actually had a pleasant experience here. Well, we've just done the first lock of the morning, Sonning Lock. And there was the nicest chap from the Environment Agency there, sort of co-working the lock with the lockkeeper. And he was so friendly. Just really nice, really helpful, telling us about all the best places to moor and where the pubs and supermarkets are and giving us advice for our onward journey. So thank you. I didn't get his name, but he was really nice. After Sonning, it is but a short hop around a couple of bends to Shiplake Lock, where we paused to refill our water tank from the supply point on the lock landing. We had to wait ages here, not just for the water, but because a huge flotilla of rowing boats turned up and all went through the lock 2 at a time. It took forever, but we had a lovely view to gaze at. Eventually, we pottered around to the lock after a large wide beam, only to find a queue had built up while the rowers were going through. Our hearts sank, but the lovely folk on wide beam Candlewood beckoned us to go ahead, as we could fit in the lock with the other boats, where they'd need all the space they could get. So this little day boat went in first, followed by this cruiser,
You might better get in this one if you want to go in front.
and the lockkeeper beckoned us in to bring up the rear, which we gratefully did. It's all quite pretty and quaint round here. In fact, there's a lovely variety of boats and houses on display all along the length of the Thames. Here's proof you don't need a big boat to enjoy the waterways. That said, a lot of people here do have big boats. We could see some kind of event was being set up on the Shiplake playing field. It looked to me like a medieval jousting tournament, something to do with the flags and the little pointed roof marquees. but I'm guessing it wasn't. Houses along here are rather grand. This one just sold for £3 million. I've no idea what this would fetch, but it's rather splendid. We passed Lower Shiplake and headed towards Henley-upon-Thames, just before which is Marsh Lock, where, you guessed it, the same rowing teams we'd seen earlier were once again taking forever to go through the lock. Look, no hate to the rowers, but a serious question: why couldn't they get out of their very long, thin and lightweight boats and carry them around instead of going in 2 by 2 through a very slow-filling lock? There's even a sign to suggest this is the case. After many minutes hovering awkwardly against the wind in the middle of the river, we finally got a spot on the lock landing, where we waited some more and watched these dogs playing in the river. Weeks passed, and finally the last of the rowboats left the lock. You can just see them heading off there. At last we had our chance and came in towards Henley, where this intriguing boat caught my eye. No, not the rowers, the narrowboat. Throughout the river you encounter these small islands, apparently called Eights, even though it's spelled Iot. This is Rod 8. That side is the mainland. That side is the 8, which as far as I can tell is accessible only by boat, or probably personal helicopter if you live around here. Henley is famous for rowing, of course, and as our lock rowers had vanished, we suspect they'd stopped and disembarked here. Or perhaps they'd been eaten by this cormorant, who was now pausing to digest the meal. Henley is very posh, the kind of place where you're probably required to wear a dinner jacket to go boating. Speaking of dinner jackets, the paddle steamer is a hire boat used for corporate events, private parties, weddings and the like. That's Henley Bridge, dating from 1786, although it's known there's been a crossing here since at least 1232. You know you're somewhere upmarket when there's a Farrow and Ball shop. This is the main straight, where the annual Henley Regatta is held, a celebration of rowing and champagne. You get the gist of it from the event dress code stating that cravats are an option, and that hats, fascinators, boaters and club caps are all very welcome. They also hold a historic boat gathering here, which I made a video about a couple of years ago. I've left a link to that in the video description. Here's Temple Island, another 8, featuring an 18th century ornamental folly. Ah, the kettle's on. Fancy a brew? Leaving Henley behind, Hambledon Lock has a most impressive weir. Along with that cup of tea, a lunchtime sandwich was called for. Cheese and tomato on seeded granary. Delicious. We came to Temple Lock, confusingly nowhere near Temple Island, and this time no lockkeeper. What's more, the power to the hydraulics was out, so some actual manual effort was required. A squirt of 3-in-1 oil wouldn't go amiss either. While we waited for the other boat to finish, we admired these Egyptian geese, which are actually ducks. Invariably found in pairs according to the British Waterfowl Association, and are pleased to confirm they clearly know what they're talking about, as there were 2 here. The manual lock mechanism is this. If the power was on, you could just press buttons at the top, but as it wasn't, you have to select which mechanism you want to alter with these levers and then turn this wheel 10,000 times.
Surprisingly tiring. It's geared really lightly, but it takes so many turns and it's such a big wheel. I do sound like a bit of a wimp there, making excuses, I know, and I am, but I'm now so hot you would not believe. Oh my word. I need to sit down and a cold drink. Blimey, O'Reilly. Come back, lockkeepers, all is forgiven.
Alright, let's not get carried away. I believe that's part of Bisham Abbey, which, rather like the geese, is not an abbey. It's a sports centre. The main manor house of the site was built in 1260 for the Knights Templar. Another collection of rowers was ahead, and we had the problem that our boat would not exactly break any speed records, so overtaking them was a glacial process. Catching up by All Saints Church, we pushed the throttle to 11 and crept by very, very slowly, giving them a wide berth. The rowers' chase boats look like great fun. I'd like to have a go on one of those. This is Marlow, where, surprise, surprise, you can learn to row. The time was 3:30, and our minds drifted towards searching for a mooring again. We always started looking quite early because mooring on the Thames is so hard to find, as all the land is privately owned. Through yet another lock. And we spotted another cormorant hunting for errant rowers to eat. Oh, there's one! Imagine owning that house! Scratch that. Imagine owning this castle? Apparently not a real castle, it was once lived in by Dame Nellie Melba, after whom the Peach Melba was named. Gibraltar Island is next, not to be confused with the island of Gibraltar. Our navigation wasn't that bad. There are some nice wide beams moored here. Native to Australia, the black swan is rare but not unheard of in the UK. We were pleased to spot this one. In other wildlife news, we were also treated to a row of cows' bottoms. This prompts my favourite joke, what's brown and steaming and comes out of cows? The Isle of Wight ferry. Shortly after that, we found a place to pull the boat in, although it was right next to an ant's nest, which I was convinced would result in the boat swarming with them by morning. Lorna insisted this was rubbish, and needless to say she was right. That's us down there, looking back at the way we'd just come. This was the first mooring where we were required to pay an £8 overnight stopping fee by the landowner, although it occurred to us later that since it was just some random woman with a dog and a card reading machine, she could have been anyone just demanding money off us. Anyway, we assumed it was all legit and went to sleep, ready for our final day's boating taking us up to Windsor. The morning began with the now traditional visit from a local swan family. Then we did the engine checks. Basically, is there any oil in there? We bid the ants farewell and set off east once more. Allow me to use my finger to explain where we were.
We are setting off from about here and heading this way.
And if you'd like to buy a copy of the Nicholson's Guide, there's a link in the video description. More danger. More danger. More danger! What peril awaits? Oh, a man in a tiny boat. It's a rather pretty lock at Cookham. Coming along here, I was hoping to see crocodiles and piranhas. But after a few minutes, what we got was the town of Maidenhead, which is, I'm told, a day's ride by horse from London. The first bridge over the river here was wooden and built in 1250. This one opened in 1777. And that's a railway bridge designed by Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Bray Lock. They could start a florist's with that lot. You know, I do the same with my armpits when they're a bit pongy. The M4 motorway meant we were nearly at Windsor, where our trip would end. But here's Bray Film Studios, home of Hammer Films, and where the Rocky Horror Picture Show was shot, as well as the model sets for Ridley Scott's Alien. That was a Victorian mansion, but is now a hotel. Ah, if you've ever wondered where racehorses keep their boats, it must be here. Speaking of nice boats, it's a Wilderness Beaver. I'm still on the lookout for one that I can afford. And here's Windsor, where the boat traffic was suddenly frenzied. We found the first available spot and moored up, leaving Ed, the boat's owner, to foot the bill. Sorry, Ed. And so we've come to the end of our 4-day trip, moored in Windsor, and oh yeah, that's Windsor Castle, that is, where the royals hang out. As evidenced by this aptly named boat. But what did Lorna make of the trip? Would you do it again?
I would do it again, but I'd like to maybe do it at a different pace, a bit slower maybe. I think if we did it again, we'd be a bit better prepared and we'd have more of an idea of where to stop and how to stop and how things work. I think we're going into it a little bit blind this time round.
Like the planes taking off from Heathrow, it was time for us to fly. Thanks for coming along on the trip. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a look at part 1 if you haven't already. There's a link in the video description. Cheerio!